hear me? You're live. Kim?
Thank you, Lawrence. Thank you.
All right, good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for joining us for the inaugural meeting of the Licensure Subcommittee. My name is Tom Tomberlin. I'm the Director of Educator Recruitment and Support at the Department of Public Instruction. I'm joined today with Chairman Miller from PEPSC and the co-chairs of this subcommittee. That would be Dr. Wesley Wood of Wilkes County and Dr. Ann Bullock of Elon University. Kim, do I have that right? I don't know.
That is correct.
Okay, good. I messed it up earlier, so I'm glad I got it correct this time. So what I'd like to do today is just kind of orient you all to the work of the Human Capital Roundtable. And give you some, just give you an opportunity to ask any questions you might want to know about the work and review.
Hey, this is what I want to commit to. This is.
And then give you, your facilitator, who's going to be Dr. Kim Evans, who's with us on the call, a chance to kind of walk through the expectations, how the work's going to get done, and what timelines and things like that are, all those burning logistical questions that you'll have. So let's start out with the next slide, Kim. The Human Capital Roundtable was a group of education stakeholders from around the state of North Carolina. They were convened by a group called SREB, the Southern Regional Education Board. And their task was to envision a better way to transform human capital, the teacher human capital pipeline. And very quickly on in this group, it was determined that the best way to achieve those changes broadly was to begin the conversation around licensure. And since licensure impacts every aspect of a teacher's career, that seemed like the logical place to start. So next slide, please, Kim. The main goal of this roundtable was to keep great teachers in the classroom and to attract highly qualified, diverse candidates into the profession. So we'll talk a little more about how those the retention and the diversity comes into play here. And then, as I said before, it was determined by the Human Capital Roundtable that the most direct path to achieving this goal, this broad kind of reform effort, was through modifying the licensure process, and all these other things would flow from that change. The Human Capital Roundtable developed a proposal, and they presented that proposal to the North Carolina State Board of Education in February. As a result of that presentation, the State Board of Education referred this work back to PEPSC, the Professional Educators Preparation and Standards Commission, to create a functional model for how this conceptual vision could be implemented in the state. So this is a very important aspect of this. I know many of you are going to have questions of how do we do this, or what does this mean? And we don't have the answers to those things. This is truly a case where this group came together and had this high-level vision of what could or might be, and then the work of these subcommittees is to really operationalize that work, bring it into reality. So there are a lot of questions that we don't know the answers to, and it will be the work of these subcommittees to put those answers in place so that we can bring a functional model to the State Board of Education. So next slide, Kim. So it might be helpful first to look at our current state of licensure policy. And what we see here on the left is you've got this narrow entrance into the field. It's narrowly defined as holding a bachelor's degree or completing or maybe passing testing, a licensure exam, and that gets you access into the pipeline. And then with the goal of moving folks from that entry point to the right, and where they're coming out with a continuing license. So there's a couple of problems with the way we currently do things. And one is you'll see in this, in the middle of that rectangle, you've got teachers just kind of in there. Where these teachers enter the initial professional license phase with a litany of requirements and not a whole lot of support for how they move through that. It's not a well-structured or scaffolded process. It's what I would call the vast wasteland of the initial license. You're kind of put in there and you're expected to find your way to that other side, oftentimes without any dedicated support. So, and there's no clear indicators within that time of whether you're meeting expectations, whether you're not suited to the profession, and people just tend to wander around till they come out to the other side. And even when they come out on the other side, it's really important to understand that effectiveness of the teacher is not considered in any way in passing through that gate. So we rely on passing test scores, but if a teacher doesn't pass the test scores, but during this time they're in that period, they're highly effective with students, we don't consider that at all in terms of their licensing. We would deny them the license unless they actually pass the test, irrespective of how well they were doing with their students. So next slide. So the Human Capital Roundtable has named this process the North Carolina Pathways to Excellence for Teaching Professionals. And what they envisioned is a pipeline that is broader at the entryway in the initial license phase. And within that, it's structured so that the teachers move through this process with clear expectations, and there's clear exit ramps for teachers who do not meet those, who fail to meet those expectations. And then in the end, as we move through to the continuing license, we want to use multiple measures, multiple ways for teachers to demonstrate their effectiveness as a means for being granted that continuing license. So we want to look more at the effectiveness of the teachers and whether they have impact on students than can they pass a test or complete a course. And that's kind of the vision that we're going for with the Human Capital Roundtable work. So when we talk about those exit ramps, what do they look like and what do we mean? So as teachers move through the process, they have a clear goal and expectation of performance, and they're given support and time and opportunity to meet that goal. So, the case of the exit ramp would be when teachers cannot demonstrate their competencies or skills in content and pedagogy, then that would be a clear indication that the teacher's not ready for the role of classroom teacher. If they cannot demonstrate any effectiveness with their students, and if they cannot complete those requirements in the time allotted to them, then we would see that as reason for exiting from the system. Now, I want to be clear about the exit. So the exit is not a way to get rid of folks. It's a way to give them the opportunity to go get to a point where they can demonstrate that effectiveness. We always want those exit ramps, those doors on the exit ramps to swing both ways. In other words, when teachers are in a position to demonstrate that effectiveness, they can re-enter the process and continue on the pathway. So in order to achieve this, the Human Capital Roundtable envisioned a multi-tier approach to licensure. So the current system we have is a two-tiered licensure system. You're an initial license, and then you're a continuing license. In this model, we see teachers, especially in the beginning phases of their career, as having that IPL, that initial license period, segmented out. So a teacher could enter the profession as a licensed one teacher. This is a teacher in residency. This teacher would have to meet educational requirements or industry certification requirements to hold that license. And then that teacher has the requirement to demonstrate mastery of content or pedagogy, one or the other, in order to move to a license 2. And the license 2 is a teacher in residency skill development. And the teacher can demonstrate that mastery of content or pedagogy by the means they do now, passing a required licensure exam, or they could complete some kind of state-approved micro-credential that demonstrates that they have the skill or competency that we're looking for, or completing some other approved process. I want to be very clear about this, that we don't know what those measures are. That is the work of this subcommittee, is to define what those measures are that will be used to grant teachers movement from one license to another and for demonstrating those competencies and skills. Once the teacher has demonstrated mastery over the content and the pedagogy, the teacher would move to a license 3. And again, you see those same multiple opportunities to demonstrate that effectiveness. We're not confining this to one thing, such as passing a licensure exam, but we want to incorporate a number of measures that teachers can use to demonstrate their effectiveness and their skill. Once the teacher has completed those initial requirements, then the teacher would be eligible to move to a license 4, or what we call an expert teacher. Now that is achieved by demonstrating effectiveness with students for 3 or more years out of 5 in that window. Now, again, I want to go back to what we mean by effective teaching instruction. That would need to be broadly defined, and it would also need to have multiple measures for teachers to demonstrate that. So I think when we talk about effectiveness in the state, a lot of times our mind goes to ABOS and the growth model for the state. That certainly could be one of the ways the teacher demonstrated effectiveness, but of course it would not. It's not broad enough to capture all the work that a teacher does, and it's certainly not applicable to enough teachers across the state for this to be a full functioning model for the state. So we have to think about other ways that teachers could demonstrate that effectiveness. So another thing I want to talk about is going back to license 1. We would see that these license 1, 2, and 3 teachers, as you can see in the graphic, they're all paired with an advanced teacher mentor, somebody with skills for helping adults learn and grow, and they would have that dedicated support during all 3 of those license tier cases. In the license 1, we would set a starting salary, a base salary for all teachers, license 1 teachers in the state, and each movement from one license to another would come with an associated increase in salary. So basically what we're doing is saying the compensation system is driven by teachers' continued acquisition of skills and demonstrated mastery and impact on students, and less about just time served coming back each year. Also in this proposal is that each of the teachers in this initial license phase would come with what we call a professional advancement account. So these are funds that are dedicated to the teacher for supporting their progress from one license level to another. And so you could see that the teachers might use that maybe to take a college course if they feel that's the best way to get to demonstrate the skill that they want, that they're required to exhibit. It could be taking if they want to take the licensure exam, it could be taking test preparation courses. It could be going back and getting better content knowledge. It could be a variety of things. We would not dictate how those funds are spent, as long as they're being spent in the pursuit of reaching one of these, their goals for that, moving to the next license level. And those professional advancement accounts come with license 1, 2, and 3. And so those teachers would have those resources dedicated to them throughout their initial license, what we consider the initial license phase. So I want to turn now to the right of this. Past the license 4, we have two kind of advanced credentials. One is the classroom excellence, and where teachers show they've already shown all this demonstrated mastery of these skills in content and pedagogy, plus they showed highly effective teaching instruction with their students for 3 or more of the 5 years of the cycle that they were in for license 4. And that what these roles are meant to do is allow these teachers to serve students at an increased capacity. I'm sure many of you are familiar with the advanced teaching roles programs that are going on across the state in many of our districts. And in some of those models, these teachers, these highly effective teachers, are teaching classrooms of much larger size with adequate support, so that their highly effective instruction is impacting more students than they normally could in a regular classroom setting. In addition to that classroom excellence, you've got advanced teacher adult leadership. These are folks that are also highly effective with student and their instructions, but they've also demonstrated effectiveness at coaching other adults or helping lead other adults to better performance, increasing their capacity, and generally, leader among teachers. And so both these license areas were developed to provide for a much needed career pathway within the classroom teaching profession. I'm sure you all know that now, in our current system, the advancement course is usually going from a teacher to an administrator, and then maybe from an administrator to a district leader or superintendent or something like that. But the teaching profession itself doesn't have a clear advancement or career pathway, and this is an effort to try to build that into the system. And this gets back to the Human Capital Roundtable's vision of retention of our highly effective teachers. If we want to retain our highly effective teachers, we have to give them the opportunity to grow and develop and take on new roles and new challenges. And for many of our teachers, administration is not the chosen path they want to take. And so this allows them to remain connected to the thing they love, classrooms and student instruction, but recognizing their exceptionality and putting them in those positions of leadership. So that's the licensure pathway. I want to point out in license 3 that star that says EPP above that pathway. So this is an effort of the Human Capital Roundtable to recognize the extraordinary contribution that our EPPs in North Carolina make to teacher preparation. So we really want to incentivize folks to do that traditional preparation route. And the reason we want that is because the data indicate that teachers who go through a traditional preparation program on average are more effective than those who go through other routes. And on average, they're retained in the profession longer than teachers of other routes. And so it's really important to recognize that contribution of our EPPs and build into this model some incentive for people to pursue that pathway. Now, what this means is if a person does a traditional EPP route and they're able, even pre-service, able to demonstrate their mastery over the content and pedagogy before they enter the classroom, then those teachers would have the opportunity to enter the profession at a license 3 rather than at a license 1 or 2. They could enter at 2, so let's say you met the content requirement, you would enter, but not the pedagogy, you would enter at a license 2. But for those teachers who can complete both of those demonstrations of mastery, then they would enter the system at a license 3 and would be working towards progressing to a license 4. And so we wanted that incentive to be clear to folks, and our desire to acknowledge the importance of the EPPs and their work in preparing our teachers. If we go back to the left-hand side to the learning permit, we're calling this the apprentice teacher. So this would be actually a license. The way it's different from the other ones that I've described is this would not allow a teacher to be the teacher of record. If you want to think about it, it's kind of formalizing our TA to teacher route that we have out there in the state now, where TAs work with a dedicated classroom teacher or teacher of record while they work on completing a bachelor's degree or other requirements to holding a license. So the thing that's really important about this is we wanted to make that a formal pathway in this licensure system to recognize those teachers who are working towards that goal of becoming a fully licensed teacher. This is not to say that it supplants or replaces the classified role of TA. We know there are many folks out there that prefer this route, and we certainly don't want to take away from that. But this is just an additional opportunity for districts to get these folks licensed so that they're in the system. It would come with a different salary. That would be somewhere below a license one, and it would allow that teacher. It would allow that recognition that that teacher is working towards completing the requirements to move through the licensure process. Let me stop for a second because I'm seeing some chats come up. Let's see. Okay, so the learning permit, this is not, so one, I would not confuse that with things we do currently like student teaching. That would be a separate, I would not construe the learning permit as a student teacher. That's a separate training program connected with our traditional route. Does also include alternative residency programs. So a residency program is where someone has already completed a bachelor's degree and is going back to get the content expertise. So these pathways would look similar for both traditional completers and residency completers. That is, if I did a traditional program and did not demonstrate either of the did not demonstrate mastery of either of the content or the pedagogy when I graduated and took a job, I would start as a license one. A teacher in residency could come in that just has a bachelor's degree, would come in as a license one as well, and then their requirement would be to enter to develop a program of study with an EPP, get the required coursework done, and demonstrate that mastery of content or pedagogy. Now, I say it like that, but I don't mean to pigeonhole it. I'm not saying that a person with a bachelor's degree would have to go back and do coursework. That's to be determined by this group. But whatever it is, a person could come in with a license one. That means they have at least a bachelor's degree, and then we determine what they can and can't do to demonstrate their mastery over content and pedagogy. Certainly, coursework requirements might be part of that, but I don't want to give the impression that I'm telling you what it is. I'm just telling you conceptually how we envision that right now. And then the next question, yes, you're welcome. How would an apprentice teacher impact campus allotments for teachers? Yeah, that's a great question. That's probably going to come out in the budget and compensation task force. So these particular apprentice teachers, we would see them. The general opinion of the Human Capital Roundtable is that we would see those as additional allotments to the school, and would not really be carved out of your existing TA budget. So it would have to be a different thing. And so the budget and compensation folks would be working on what does that mean? How would you appropriately allot a number of these apprentice roles to a district. I'm guessing it could be something like ADM would be the basis of those allotments, but yeah, it would change the allotment, but it would have to be a dedicated allotment. Is there a pathway to license 4 without completing an approved program at an EPP? License 3 would demonstrate effectiveness. Yeah, so that's a great question, and I can't answer that question, and you're going to have to answer that question. We do envision a system where teachers can move. You don't have to move linearly through each of the phases of the license, but what it takes to jump from one to another in terms of their effectiveness and what demonstration of skills and competencies is required to make those jumps, that is how you're going to have to figure this out. So those are great questions. Conceptually, the Human Roundtable said they would like to see that, and it's our job to work that out. What does that look like? What are those things that can move you? How do you leapfrog over one license area or one license level? And that's those are great questions, and I'm going to be looking to you, Brad, to give me the answers to that. So the next question: how does this impact current educators? Well, it doesn't, because it's not a model yet. So I think the question is, once we implement this model, how will current situations be incorporated into this model? That's a great question. I think that's a question for all the subcommittees, is how do you effectively integrate this into the system to recognize what, our more seasoned or veteran teachers have done and credit them for that while maintaining the integrity of the model. So, that could be issues of compensation. And so certainly that would have to be addressed by budget compensation. That could be issues of licensure. So you would have to work on this to say, does everybody who holds a continuing license currently get automatically moved into the license 4? I don't know the answer to that, and that's going to be the work of this group to determine how that works, because that's part of the development of a new model, is how do you initially integrate it with the current model so that it works for everybody. Is there compensation for the licensed 4 teacher who supervises an apprentice teacher? That's a great question, and that would have to be answered, I think, by budget and compensation. I think you, as the licensure committee, we're already recognizing that in this conceptual model, this license these initially licensed teachers, the license 1 through 3, they would have to be paired with an advanced teacher mentor. It's part of your job to determine what that means. Does that mean a license 4 teacher? Does that mean a license 4 advanced teacher in adult leadership? And then if, whatever it is that's determined at that level, then you would have the opportunity to make the recommendation or to refer a recommendation over to the Budget and Compensation Committee that as part of that compensation, if they are supervising, those supervising teachers should get this in addition to their salary. So these are all great questions, and I think it's great that we're getting them, because it allows me to reinforce the idea that this has not all been worked out in advance. We're not bringing you a model, fully formed model for you to kind of pick apart. What we're bringing you is a high-level concept, and it is the job of this team to decide what that is operationally, how we can make this work. Now, to that, I will say, that's a really hard thing to just kind of generate out of nothing what should be there. The work of DPI will be to continually put up for you kind of a straw man recommendation. And your job is to just tear it down, tear it apart, put it back together so that it works. We don't have any expectation that we know what this should be. So we'll put some things in front of you to react to, and then hopefully with all the collective wisdom and intelligence in these subcommittees, you're going to take that, that straw man and really build it into something that can work and is viable. So that's the idea of these subcommittees. So as written, a license 1 could have 24 hours of content or pass licensure content exams, then pass FTPA or whatever micro-credential is acceptable, and bypass any coursework. Good test takers can accomplish this, but to get to license 4, they have to show effectiveness 3 out of 5 years simultaneously. Yes, I think if I'm following your logic, it is possible that a licensed 1 teacher could come in with, and I don't want to stipulate that the 24 hours of content has to remain. That's up to you as the licensure committee to determine. Is it enough to have a bachelor's in anything? Or do they have to have a certain number of hours? All that's up for play. I don't want anybody to think that what currently has to be transported into this new model. This is kind of tabula rasa. You can make this whatever you want it to be. But in general, to your statement, if somebody could come in as a license 1, they could meet those mastery requirements in a certain amount of time and move to license 3. But in order to get from a license 3 to a license 4, they have to show some kind of effectiveness. And that's the other challenge, is creating those measures of effectiveness that are available to all teachers and that are equally rigorous across the board. So clearly you could see a case where EVOS might be one of the measures that a teacher could use to demonstrate effectiveness, but what are those other things that a teacher could use to demonstrate that? And so your point is well taken, Vivian, that if you want to think about it this way, license 1 through 3 is all about demonstration of skill and mastery, and then the movement from license 3 to license 4 is about putting the effect to that mastery or that skill. So you've got to demonstrate the impact on the students in order to move further in the licensure phase. So just kind of being able to demonstrate something can only carry you so far in this model as it's currently constructed. These are great questions, and I can tell they're going to lead to some great conversation when we get to the development phase of our work. So next slide, Kim. So these are just linear representations of what we're proposing here. Here you can see we started out with somebody at the learning permit phase and how they would progress through this. I think that really important for you to recognize here is that the Human Capital Roundtable really tried to build this model on 2 guiding principles. One, the demonstration of skill or competency that is measurable and is performed in an authentic setting. In other words, in the presence of students. So how do you, moving forward in this means you can show us that you can do things in your classroom that have a positive impact on kids and their learning. And then second, that impact on student learning. Can you demonstrate that you are helping your students learn and grow and improve? And those are the 2 driving principles behind this entire system. And it's going to be really important as we think about these measures that we want to use for demonstrating effectiveness. Do they meet those 2 guiding principles? Are they a demonstration of mastery, of skill, and does it have impact on students and their learning? So those are the 2 questions we're constantly going to come back to you with whenever we make some decision about what could a possible measure be. Next slide, you have the teacher in residency where they've got a bachelor's degree, but maybe no training, and then they move through the process. So why is there a separation between content and pedagogy when both are needed for effectiveness? I wouldn't construe it as a separation. I would construe it as a scaffolding of the skill building. Yes, they're both required for effectiveness. What we have today is you enter the classroom, here's your requirements for demonstrating your content and pedagogy, go. What we're trying to do here is recognize that we can achieve one first, and by demonstrating that mastery, you can advance in the system from one license level to another, which is also advancing on the salary schedule. Certainly you can do both at the same time. There's nothing to prevent it, and that's the jumping aspect of what we're talking about here. What we're trying to do here is scaffold the learning for our early career teachers so that they're not overwhelmed and feel like they're not supported, but we've got a clear message of what the requirement is in each stage of the license, and meeting those milestones is rewarded with additional compensation. So I don't think separation is quite the word I would use. I would say maybe compartmentalization. So really giving these things to folks in a manageable chunk rather than just throwing it all at them, which is the way we currently do it now in our licensure system. But certainly that doesn't mean that somebody who has the capacity to demonstrate all that at one time would not be able to show that and advance appropriately. So the traditional pathway, of course, this assumes that the person did that demonstration of content and pedagogy before entering the profession, and if they did that, then they could enter the license system at a license level 3, and then the requirement then would be to employ that competency and skill in terms of impact on student learning, and that would be the way they move forward in the process. Next, so the idea here was you've got these content and pedagogy requirements for your early stage teachers, and so we've got the goals that the Human Capital Roundtable wanted to achieve, and those goals are to provide agency, opportunity, choice for our teachers to prove or to demonstrate their competency and skill. And so the idea of just a licensure exam is pretty narrow, and so we wanted to expand those offerings or the pathways by which teachers could demonstrate their competency. And it allows for more meaningful alternatives that are better correlated to effective teaching. And so in the case of student learning, if you've got a teacher that is just doing extraordinary things in terms of helping their math students grow in meeting proficiency requirements or whatever, why wouldn't you want to use that as a way to demonstrate their competency to hold the license? Instead of forcing them to go back and pass a licensure exam that may or may not have anything to do with how well their students are learning. So the proposition is to have a menu of options. We don't want to throw out those assessments. Many of our teachers are very good test takers, and if that is a way for them to demonstrate that mastery or content, we certainly want that opportunity available to them. But also, what can we do in addition to that? So one suggestion is to explore creating competency-based micro-credentials for those content and pedagogical requirements. So can teachers demonstrate in the classroom that they have these skills and demonstrate it to the degree that we would find that acceptable for granting them or for meeting the pedagogy or the content requirement. And then number 3, allowing the opportunity to use demonstrated effectiveness in lieu of any of these assessments or even the micro-credentials. So if you're getting the job done and we can measure that, and we measure it accurately and validly, can we use that as a way to license our teachers? And so the rationale behind this is that, we know in this state and across the nation, praxis tests are barriers to a diverse workforce. We know that minority candidates struggle with these tests, with passing of these tests at greater rates than their majority counterparts. And the problem with that is we cannot find any strong relationship to performance on those praxis exams and future effectiveness as a teacher. So, and we can find many examples in our state where we have teachers that are being highly effective with their students, but are unable to pass the praxis exam. And so we're seeing the narrowness of defining what it means to meet the licensure requirements is a hindrance to us in diversifying the workforce and for promoting highly effective teachers in the classroom. Now, I do want to say that the TPA, PPAT, these are your pedagogy exams, and the Pearson tests of foundations of reading and mathematics for elementary and ECGC teachers, they have been found to correlate with future with teacher effectiveness. So there is some relationship there. So again, we don't want to get rid of these things. What we want is a situation where those assessments are part of a comprehensive set of measures that would allow a teacher to move through the licensure process, but not restrict it to those measures alone. So then we turn to the idea of continuing licenses. Once a teacher reaches a level 4, or what we call today a continuing license, the requirement is that over the period of 5 years, that teacher accumulate a certain number of seat hours in professional learning, with some requirements around what area that professional learning has to be in. But that learning is really measured by seat time. It's not measured or not evaluated in terms of any impact that it's having on students and their learning. So what the Human Roundtable is recommending here is that 5-year renewal cycle be built on continuous positive impact on students and their learning. And so I want to be very clear again, multiple measures are key here. We're not talking just about EBOS because that's pretty narrow in what it's measuring, and it's not available to all teachers. So we have to think about what does it mean to have positive outcomes for students? What does that look like? How can we look at this in terms of mastery and depth of mastery of content, skills, and competencies of our teachers and their instructional capabilities? And then what is that suite of offerings that we can provide teachers that allow them many opportunities and chances in different ways to demonstrate that positive impact on students. And so here what we would see is no longer would we say, sit for 80 hours over the period, sit in some kind of training or learning for 80 hours over the next 5 years, but demonstrate to us that whatever you did to get better, that's manifesting in the presence of students. And let us find a way to measure that and credit teachers for that, for the renewal of their licenses. I'm sorry, I'm checking the chat real quick before I move on. So again, I feel like we're having some discussion about the requirements that aren't even requirements. So I want to be very clear with you all that this team, is building those requirements. if the will of this subcommittee is that a teacher could not get to level 3 without demonstrating some that teacher effectiveness or effectiveness with student learning should not be a measure for content knowledge or pedagogical knowledge, that is yours to determine. So I mean, I feel like you're saying, oh, this is not quite right about the model. There is no model right now. It's a concept, and so how one moves through those things is determined by this group. So, you know, those are great things that we're going to get to hashing all that out. But at this time, I don't want you to assume that there's any preconceived determination about how things have to work in this. This is yours to develop. We're giving you some, again, this is where we're putting up the straw man for you to tear down and decide what you don't like in it and replace it with things that you do like. So then the final thing I want to talk about is these license 4 advanced credentials. Teachers who have a license 4 would have the opportunity to obtain these advanced credentials, the Master Teacher Classroom Excellence and the Master Teacher Adult Leadership. And again, as I said before, the Classroom Excellence advanced credential would allow a teacher to serve students at an increased capacity, perhaps with the support of, you know, TAs or apprentice teachers. And then the Master Teacher Adult Leadership, those are teachers that working with early career teachers or teachers who were unable to demonstrate effectiveness, and they are really skilled in helping adults grow and learn, and they would function in those capacities. And then we're back to the high-level model. So, and again, this is just a way we put it together to help everybody understand what the idea is. Nothing should be construed as sacrosanct. You know, I really enjoy the saying that sacred cows make delicious hamburgers. If you feel like there's something out there that people say, oh, you can't touch that, then I would encourage you to touch it and change it and modify it to something that makes sense and is going to promote better outcomes for our kids. And empower teachers to continuously grow and improve throughout their career. So, it is the belief of the Human Capital Roundtable that this model presents a lot of wins for North Carolina. One, it restores the respect of the teaching profession that it so richly deserves. Builds a more diverse quality teaching force and increases our teachers' instructional capabilities. It entices more young professionals, career switchers, and out-of-staters to teaching. We have a model that allows people to grow early and often and move quickly through the demonstration of skill. It invests in our teachers, in our students, and in the North Carolina economy as a whole. And we would be the first in the nation to innovate in this way. So after the state board received this presentation from the Human Capital Roundtable, they directed the work, they approved this vision, this high-level vision, and they remanded the work to the Professional Educator Preparation and Standards Commission to develop this model. So here are the 3 big tasks that PEPSC is charged with. They must develop the policy and procedure recommendations to actualize the proposal. They propose opportunities to overcome challenges to implementation. So again, this goes back to the question I got before. How do teachers, current teachers fit into this model? That's part of the work of this roundtable, is figuring that out. And to broaden stakeholder input. And that's why you are all here. You all represent expertise in the state and a unique perspective on K-12 issues and on teacher human capital in general. So we're really relying on on you to build out a broad coalition of experts to come up with a model that can serve teachers and ultimately students. So we, in consultation with PEPSC leadership, have developed 4 subcommittees that will address this work. The first one is advancement and development, and that is that subcommittee met earlier today. If you want to think about it as the professional learning that goes along with this, and how one leverages that learning to move through the system. Then there's preparation and entry. How do we prepare teachers for this new model, and then how do they enter the profession? And then there's licensure, which is your subcommittee, and then finally budget and compensation, working out all those details of how we raise teacher salaries and simultaneously provide better opportunities for advancement within the teaching profession. So just to give you a little insight here, I'm gonna go back to that one just for one sec, Kim. So in terms of that advancement and development and licensure, there's a very interesting interplay here. So the licensure team, you're going to be charged with coming up with those measures of effectiveness and demonstration of skill and competency, and those measures of student impact. Then those things that you develop and approve as your subcommittee, those get handed off to the advancement and development folks, and they're doing the configuration of how they interplay to move a teacher through the system. So you're developing the measures, and then we've kind of divided that task between the 2 groups. You're in charge of developing those things, what they look like, the whole array of opportunities for the multiple measures approach, and then the advancement and development team are how do we configure, or what's the right combination or the depth of those skills and measures to move advance through the licensure process. And with that, I will stop for any questions you may have, and then I'm gonna turn it over to your facilitator, who's gonna walk through some of the logistics of this. But I do want to know if there's any questions out there that I can help with. All right, I'm not seeing any, so Kim, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Hello everyone, my name is Kim Evans. Hold on, there was something added to the chat. Okay, it's a thank you. My name is Kim Evans, and I work at NCDPI with Tom, and I work with PEPSC, which is the commission that has been charged with this work, the subcommittee work, and I'll be facilitating this subcommittee as well. And I wanted to say, before I start off with the role of the subcommittee, what it is and what it is not, is that as a facilitator, more than likely I will not be taking such a huge role in the subcommittee work from now on. It will be much more led by the co-chairs, and we recognized that at the first meeting Dr. Sachs did, that we have taken a huge part of this meeting, NCDPI has, to start things off, but from now on it will be the role of the co-chairs, which I will introduce you to as we go through these slides, to really lead the subcommittees from now on. So I wanted to dive right into what the role of the subcommittee is. It's about making the proposal that Tom talked about functional, and being able to really fill in those gaps about what that proposal was all about. So all those questions you were asking him during his part of the presentation, those are the areas that we will be working on either through one of the 4 subcommittees. We are not here to reinvent the proposal. The proposal is as set, So it's the skeleton, and we are filling in the meat on those bones to make sure that the proposal is functional and that it is well done. In addition, we are focusing on certain areas that are assigned, and you'll see that within the next couple of slides. We'll talk about what those subcommittees, each of the subcommittees is working on through different questions that are posed in those slides. We will be making sure that we understand what other subcommittees are working on and how it overlaps with our own work, and how we need to collaborate at times, but we will not be thinking about only what another subcommittee is working on, which could get in the way of our own work production. We wanted to also make sure that we're identifying any challenges and proposing solutions as the role of the subcommittee. So if you see a challenge, then help us with the solution. As subcommittee members, that's something that you can also go to your co-chairs and send them an email about challenges that you see, propose those solutions. We want to have that positive intent and work together as a group and a team to get this work done. We're trying to make it so that that collaboration prevents us from having any obstacles and barriers as a subcommittee. And lastly, we want to make sure that we keep asking, and then what, and then what, and then what, so that we can make sure that we are filling in all of those gaps for making the first bullet possible, making the proposal functional. And then we want to make sure, because of that, asking those questions, we want to make sure that we are having that exhaustive consideration as a role of the subcommittee. So going through those 4 pieces of the subcommittee, we're hoping that this helps us function better as a team, and we can keep in mind what the work is. I also wanted to go through some of the norms that we'll be going through all of the subcommittees. In fact, this is the same PowerPoint that all of the subcommittees will be seeing during all 4 of the first meetings. And the first one is the work of the subcommittees is led by the interests and needs of North Carolina students and educators. That's one of the guiding practices that Tom discussed, is that we are really focusing on student impact and as part of this work, and making sure that it leads back to what is happening with students and educators in the classroom. The second one is the subcommittees will collaborate and work to achieve consensus on their final proposals. We do not expect, and we know that it won't be achievable, to have unanimous agreement across the board. However, we do want to make sure that we do have consensus on what that final proposal is, and think about how we can work together to reach that goal. And number 3, all opinions are valued. Members will make sure that they respect each other's opinions and not diminish any other opinions that are proposed or put on the table. And number 4, members will share talk time and not dominate conversations. So we need to make sure that we share the floor and give everyone an opportunity to speak and contribute. Number 5, members will speak with specificity so others fully understand your thoughts. So make sure that when you do have an idea or you have a solution, that you're coming with your complete thought. Think about what details you think might need to be a part of that, so that everybody has a clear understanding of what you are discussing. And number 6, members commit to full engagement at meetings and on important work in between meetings. So to let you know that some of this work will happen in between these meetings, because these meetings will be a short period of time compared to what could possibly be some of the work that we might need to be done in between to then get ready for the next meeting. I know at the last meeting, we were discussing, what types of things that type of important work in between meetings could be. It could be looking at research articles and thinking about how we might have to have surveys about a certain topic with licensure across our members to figure out a solution for a particular area. So we talked about that it might have to be survey-based or research-based. And so that would be something that we would gather and send out, and you would find that in your email, but there would be directions and understanding as to what that important work would be gathering and helping us out with our next steps. And then also making sure that we are fully engaged at meetings. I know that we are all busy and we have incredible schedules, but during these 2 hours, we really need you to commit, as well as in between meetings when you are working on a certain piece of information or solution. We really need you to commit to be a part of this team, fully a part of this team. So you have a full understanding of what is being talked about and what next steps could be. And then going forward, to give you kind of the larger picture of what happens with the subcommittee work. So once the subcommittee develops recommendations, those recommendations will be moved to the PEPSC, the commission as a whole, to then review and either return to the subcommittee or decide to take a vote and approve and then formally recommend the model to the board. And then the board can either approve or return for additional work to PEPSC, and then possibly go back to subcommittees depending on what that ask is from the board. And once the board does approve, then it goes to the JLEOC, who receives a formal proposal from the board. And then they decide from there where that proposal goes and what happens. So these are the two guiding principles that Tom has mentioned in his part of the presentation, and I also referred to a little bit ago. And the first one is about student impact, and does your idea or solution have impact on students? So we want to see that it's focusing directly back to students that are in classrooms. And then number two, is it measurable in an authentic setting? So meaning, is it measurable as in teachers in classrooms with real students and real learning going on? So we want to keep those two guiding principles in mind as we go through the discussions with the subcommittee to make sure that the work is guided in these two areas. And now we're going to get into the different questions that have to do with the 4 subcommittees. And the first one is licensure advancement and development. And I think Dr. Robert Sachs is present to provide this overview. Yes. And he is ready. You may have the floor, Dr. Sachs. Sorry, Robert, we can't hear you. Can you hear me?
Kim, I think if he's having trouble, I think it's fine just to go through these at a high level. We don't need to explicate
Okay.
them.
I might be able to do it. Can you hear me now?
There you go.
Okay, there you go, Robert.
Yes, Cat stepped on the mute button. Yeah, so I'm Robert Sachs. I'll be working with this subcommittee, and I'll go through them at a very high level. One thing I want to point out to the group, Tom has already mentioned this, there's some overlap in some of our work. And so one of the things the facilitators are going to need to do is make sure that ideas that emerge in our work that relate to another subcommittee get transported over to that subcommittee. And Kim's going to talk more about what that looks like. But what our committee is going to be looking at, and you may have seen in the information that candidates come out. Earlier we were called the Professional Development Subcommittee, and while we are about professional learning and professional development, we really are about advancing to the next level and developing those skills. So the questions are, what specific skills must a teacher have and demonstrate to advance to that next license level in the model that Tom shared? How and from whom might teachers develop these new skills and competencies? How might teachers confirm that they've acquired those necessary skills? And there needs to be an external verifier that they have learned and can demonstrate those skills. So one of the things our group will have to wrestle with is who should, could, and would verify the acquisition of those skills. Is it someone in the district, someone at DPI, some external vendor, or some unique combination of all three? That's something our committee will have to wrestle with. What's the relationship of the professional teaching standards and teacher evaluation? We already have some existing structures, standards, and expectations for educators. So what's their intersection with this tiered licensure system? And then finally, as we think about how to support and develop educators to advance and move forward in this system, how do the roles of those that support teachers historically change, or how are they affected by this? How does the principal's interaction with teachers at each licensure level, the mentors and other teacher leaders, how might those be impacted or contribute to moving forward? So these are just some high-level questions that this particular subcommittee will be looking at, and of course every bullet will have 100 questions beneath it. So as your committee does their work, if there are things you think this committee needs to be considering, pass those along to Kim and she'll make sure we get them. Kim, thanks for letting me share that.
Sure. The next, you know what, I'm gonna come back to the licensure slide. I wanted to end with that one. The next one is budget and compensation, and that is led by Dr. Anthony Graham and Dr. Aaron Fleming as the co-chairs. And for budget and compensation for facilitator, that'll be a split between Dr. Tom Tomberlin and Dr. Andrew Seiberg. So,
Hey, Kim, I'll take this one real quick. So,
okay.
yeah, just really quickly, so determining what those salary levels for the licensure tiers are, the salary for, you've got the apprentice through the level 4, and then the salary for those positions for which a license for advanced is required. That's either that idea of a classroom excellence teacher who's teaching a greater number of students, or that mentoring teacher who's coaching and guiding early career teachers or teachers who are struggling through the licensure process. What hold harmless provisions are required? So this goes to the integration piece of this, like how do we make sure teachers entering this model don't earn less than they currently do, and also have sufficient opportunity to grow and advance regardless of where they are in the current system. How are out-of-state teachers integrated into this new system? At what level do they enter, and what can we recognize from other states in terms of positioning them correctly in this new system? And what is the cost of the proposal from OSBM? And that's the Office of State Budget Management. And so, a lot of this work has to have cost attached in order for the General Assembly to fully understand the implications of our proposed model. So what does that mean in terms of, your professional advancement accounts that you're attaching to teachers? What does that look like as a recurring cost for the General Assembly? So those are the fun questions that budget compensation will be addressed.
Thank you, Tom. And the third subcommittee is preparation and entry, and that is led by Dr. Van Dempsey and Dr. Hank Weddington as the co-chairs. And the questions and the facilitator will be Andrew Seiberg for this subcommittee. So the questions that will be focused for the work of this subcommittee are, what are the requirements for entering the profession for various entry points in the system, such as the apprentice entry point or someone that is out of state? And so this subcommittee will really need to think about what those requirements will be to enter at various points in that system, within the system. what is the role of the EPP in supporting early career teachers regardless of pathway? So thinking about the role of the EPP, and then the next question would be thinking about the role of the LEA and being able to support those early career teachers or the beginning teachers, regardless of when they enter or how they enter the pathway for licensure. And how would the EPP accountability model need to be modified to support the new licensure system? So thinking about the accountability model that exists now, what would need to be done in order to make sure that it is holding EPPs accountable within the new licensure system, because right now it is using measures that may or may not be a part of the system, depending on what is decided by the subcommittees. And then the last question would be, how would the beginning teacher support program need to be modified to support the new licensure system? So thinking about how the beginning teacher support program, what would need to be done to make sure that it is supporting beginning teachers with this new licensure system, what steps need to be taken, and what details need to be added to those programs to make sure that they align. And now I'm going to go back to the licensure subcommittee, and this is headed by Dr. Wesley Wood and Dr. Ann Bullock as co-chairs. And I'm going to go through the questions, and then I'm going to give Dr. Wood and Dr. Bullock a chance to say something if they would like to introduce themselves as co-chairs of the licensure subcommittee. There are three overarching questions for the subcommittee. The first one is, what are the measures that satisfy advancement through the system tiers? And Tom has talked a lot about this as he went through the model itself, or the concept itself, the idea itself. What are these multiple measures? And so we need to think as a subcommittee what those multiple measures would be, and what we would think that a teacher needs to learn at different times within their career, what would help prove those through these multiple measures. And so thinking about the assessment, but also the micro-credentials, and then any other choices that we think would match what we need for these measures. And then the second question, what is the length of allowed time in each licensure tier? So thinking about, is it 3 years, 5 years, how many years we're thinking for each of the tiers to get through each of the levels of this licensure idea. And then the third one would be, what are the rules and expectations when a candidate fails to meet requirements in each tier, requirements / time period for reapplication. So we're thinking about not that a candidate is, not necessarily that a candidate is failing so with this particular set of questions, we're thinking about candidates that have the allotted amount of time that they're not able to fulfill the requirements within that time period. The particular requirements within that time period. I'm sorry, I was reading the chat box. And what would we require in order for them to reapply and re-enter the system at different tiers, or at the next tier? What would those expectations be for that candidate? And so I wanted to give Dr. Wood and Dr. Bullock an opportunity to introduce themselves.
Hello, subcommittee members. My name is Wesley Wood. I'm the Assistant Superintendent of Wilkes County Schools. I currently serve on the PEPSC Commission and have served on that committee since it started as one of two HR and personnel representatives across the state. It's pretty obvious this afternoon from looking at the chat that many of you have lots of questions, just like all of us, and will continue to have questions and comments and concerns. But one of the things that we, both Ann and I know, is that your expertise will be super valuable as we go through this process. I'm just trying to remind myself that this process is not going to be something that takes place overnight, but more like eating an elephant, one bite at a time. But look forward to working with you, and we'll be looking forward to having further conversations as we move forward in the process.
Thanks, Wesley. This is Ann Bullock. I'd like to welcome everyone as well. I'm the Dean and Professor and Director of Teacher Education at Elon University. And I'd like to say that I appreciate all the comments in the chat, and this might feel very controlled to people. It does feel a little bit like we're given a small piece to think about, but I want you to know that we can think about all of this, right? So as long as we come up with solutions and think about, so I want us to keep that in mind. So I hope when we move forward, Wesley and I'll come up with some structures where we can discuss the pros and cons of each of these pieces and what the impact will be, et cetera, et cetera. And I really like the idea of us thinking about evidence and also the different pathways. So we look forward to working with all of you. And if you, and I will jokingly say, but not really jokingly, that I felt like I was put as co-chair of this committee because I always speak out in PEPSC as a member. So I will also speak out here, and I expect all of you to speak out as well from your opinions. So I look forward to working with all of you. We look forward to leading us to creating something innovative and new for North Carolina.
Thank you, Dr. Wood and Dr. Bullock. Now I'm going to move to the end of the presentation with communication and housekeeping. And I wanted to, we have largely been talking about what the role of the co-chairs are and DPI staff, but I just wanted to give a little summary that the subcommittee co-chairs are the leaders of the group. They're the people that will be helping to plan what the next steps will be. They will meet with DPI staff on a regular basis to make sure that things are collaborated between the two groups, and that whatever is needed of the subcommittee, then DPI staff make sure that they can bring that research or that data, or whatever is needed, that we're able to provide that to the subcommittee to help the work move on to the next steps. And then on top of that, DPI staff are also facilitators. So we will be working together to make sure that this work comes together. And then for setting up meetings, I will continue to use the doodle poll for April. I'm hoping to have another meeting set towards the end of April. So we'll be using the doodle poll. If I didn't happen to send the doodle poll to you because you were added to the list at a later date, then I will make sure to add that to you. I think I have a couple people that need access to the doodle poll, so I will send that to you after this meeting. From then on, after April, I'm hoping to talk to the co-chairs about setting a possible regular time that we could actually meet and possibly survey subcommittee members as to what would be the best time during the month that we could meet at least once a month. So that's what I'm hoping we can do next steps after April around setting the meetings. And then thinking about where materials, resources, and discussions reside. we have the newsletter that I sent prior to the meeting, and it is also attached to the online agenda. And I wanted to show and discuss that next, as well as the SharePoint access website. So I will be going, I'm sorry, I'm reading the chat box really quickly. I will be going to those two resources in just a second. I will be, so the PowerPoint, there has been a question about sharing the PowerPoint, and that will be through the SharePoint access website. And I will give everyone access to that after this meeting. So, and where you are right now, you are linking directly into my WebEx, my personal room. And so this is also live streamed directly from the State Board of Education room on the 7th floor at DPI. So I'm going to move over to the SharePoint site. So this is our SharePoint site, and I will be sharing this personally with each of you using your email, and you will have edit access. So I also wanted to let you know that.
Kim, this is Andrew. I think if you're trying to provide it as a visual right now, you're not there yet.
Sorry, thank you.
Oh, there you go.
Thank you. Sorry about that. I also wanted to let you know that after this is shared, this can only be shared by me. So I have to physically share this site with you by your email. So this cannot be shared outside of these groups. We wanted you to have a place where you could, because these are public meetings, we also wanted you to have a place where you could collaborate as a subcommittee without any outside voices. So we wanted to make sure that you had that opportunity with this resource. So I'm going to show you the documents. So you would go into the document tab, and you will have access to all 4 of these folders. So the co-chairs have decided that as a subcommittee member that you need to see what's going on in all 4 subcommittees. So I'm going to go into the Licensure Subcommittee folder, and you will see, here's the graphic that Tom reviewed with the outline of the licensure model. And then this is the first meetings folder. And in it you will find, this is the PowerPoint, and this is the newsletter 1-pager, and I'm going to go over that in just a second. And these will be meeting notes, meeting minutes, and then it will be turned into a PDF after that is complete. In addition, you will also find a link to the recording for the meeting. And then these are the guiding principles that you should read over when you have an opportunity that were talked about during this meeting. So this is with more detail around those guiding principles. So I wanted to go through, and also, so this gives you an opportunity right here. If you click on the questions, then this comes up and you can pose any questions. So you will have editing access. So please go in and ask any questions that you might have around the meeting, anything that you might have around any of the materials, anything that you might have around anything that is covered at the meeting or that you think might need to be next steps. You can also provide any questions or suggestions in this document, and it will be visited on a regular basis. And I wanted to go to the 1-pager, which is our newsletter, and there will be a newsletter prior to every meeting and then after every meeting, to provide you with prep for the meeting and an agenda, and then also a follow-up from the meeting. So you can see that this is a licensure subcommittee meeting, and it has our co-chairs and the date of the meeting. There's the meeting agenda, and then this time around we had an introduction. And on this side of your newsletter, you will normally find general information that has to do with what's going on during that day's meeting. And then on the back side, since we had not had a meeting before, this is the meeting preview, and it lists out the questions, the probing questions for our licensure subcommittee, and then also about the SharePoint site, and then I will send out email invitations to access the site after the meeting. If you have trouble accessing the site, please email me as soon as you know that you're having trouble. And then if you have any questions or suggestions about any of these tools that I'm showing you now, please email me directly. But usually on the back, the co-chairs will have an opportunity to share their thoughts through acknowledgements and next steps for the subcommittee. And I see a question here. There will be a list of the subcommittee members for each group that you will be able to view. I need to add that to the folders. That was a request from the last meeting. You're welcome. Any other questions about these resources, these tools? Any questions about the PowerPoint? Well, now we're free to open up for any type of thoughts or if you do think of any questions, feel free to write those in the chat or unmute yourself to discuss.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Deb Hoffman. I don't have a question, but I did just want to express my appreciation for the work that has already been done. I think this is something that has been a long time coming. It's a really bold move, and thank you for the opportunity to participate.
Thank you. I see a question in the chat is, what is the target timeline for completion of all the subcommittee work? So the hope is that the subcommittee would be able to have all things done in a year. So then that would mean that, or the work would be done within a year. So that would mean,
Kim, can I interrupt you for a second? I noticed that Chairman Miller addressed this in the previous one, but I noticed he's dropped off the meeting, so I'm going to try to repeat what he said. So I want everybody on this subcommittee to know that the General Assembly is aware of this work and has kind of indicated a green light to both the State Board of Education and the Superintendent of Public Instruction to move this work forward. As I will quote Dr. Miller in the previous session as saying the messaging from the General Assembly is to move forward and be bold. So I'm happy for the bold statement. I hope we are being bold. As terms of timeline, the General Assembly has indicated they would like to see something to them by the next year's short session, which is May 2022. Is that correct, Catherine? I want to make sure. I think you're much more connected with those timelines than I am. Yes. So, if we think about that May 2022, this work is going to, once you've finalized your subcommittee recommendations, that needs to go to the full body of PEPSC for approval. That could be a 2-month process at least. And then once it's approved by PEPSC and recommended to the State Board of Education, that's another 2-month process at a minimum. So if we think about May to the General Assembly, we need to back up, and that puts us in January of 2022. So really, the work of this group really needs to be ready for submission to the full body of PEPSC somewhere by the end of this calendar year. And I know that is a short time, and we're aware of that, and we're going to do everything that we can from a staffing perspective to make this work as efficient as it possibly can be for you. So that's kind of the timeline message that we received earlier from Chairman Miller.
So, hello, this is Rob Ellison, Charlotte Mecklenburg Schools. Hope everybody is well. My question is, the presentation today was it recorded? And could it be added to the SharePoint site just for reference?
Yes, so I want to let you know that all of our meetings will be recorded, and they will be live streamed straight from the State Board of Education boardroom, and they will be present on the YouTube site. And I will make sure to add the link to the minutes of the meeting for every meeting. So you will have the link embedded within those minutes.
Great, thank you.
Sure.
So Ken, that's something really important we need to say explicitly to all members of the subcommittee. These are public meetings, so they will be recorded, they will be live streamed. We can't edit out things, so this work is going to get difficult and challenging at times. But I would urge you all to remember that everything that we say in these committee meetings will be a matter of public record. And I don't say that so that we don't have challenging conversations. I just say it, make sure we're doing it in such a way that it would be okay for the public to witness it, because more than likely they will.
Tom, this is Vivian Covington. Thank you everyone for being here today and listening. I do have a point of clarification, please. So when you were going over that, you stated that none of this was set in stone as I think a comment to what I put in the chat. But when I see what our direct work is, it says it's not to reinvent the proposal. So are we to understand that there will be a learning permit teacher, there will be licensure 1, 2, 3, 4, there will be advanced teachers, and we're just trying to figure out how that works? Or will or can any of that be changed? Because I saw one place where this was called a proposal, and then people used the term this model was already shared with the General Assembly and the State Board. So I'm still confused about where our leeway is.
Yeah, and I apologize if we were loose with our semantics there, Vivian. I see the confusion that might have caused. It is a proposal. So I don't think so. I don't think that we have to. I think what we do know is expectations of how any model would work were presented to the State Board of Education, and they approved those concepts. So what I would say to these folks is, to all you folks is, no, this isn't predetermined, but you need to think carefully about if you go really far out from what's been recommended, that you're going to have the challenge of the State Board of Education potentially rejecting that. Because if what they're seeing is not kind of in line with what they feel like they were approving, then there's a good chance that this could be sent back and asked to be revised. And just to let you all know how that process works, The state, PEPSC makes recommendations for policy to the State Board of Education. If the board receives a recommendation and does not approve it, they send it back to PEPSC for revisions and are clear about what those revisions they would like to see are. PEPSC then can make those revisions and resubmit a recommendation, or they can resubmit without revising according to how they feel about that. If the board rejects it a second time, then PEPSC and by extension, this subcommittees would be out of the process of developing this model. So the short answer to your question is yes, you can change any part of this. What we're providing you is the information that the board reviewed and said, that looks like what we want. Let's go make it operational. So, you kind of do so at your own peril. We're going to try to help you understand where you may be coloring outside of the lines on this, and just kind of warn you that may not be what the board is looking for, or it might get rejected by the board, but we're not going to tell you can't do something. If we get in a situation where PEPSC does a second recommendation and the board doesn't approve it, then the board then would direct DPI to develop the model. So I'm just letting you know what the process is. I'm not issuing any warnings or anything. I'm just saying that's how the process works. So you need to keep that in your head as you think about developing out this model and what this looks like and where you want to deviate from what was recommended to the board. And I'm not saying in any way that's a disqualifier. I think then we need to be prepared as a subcommittee to really put forth the rationale for why we're changing it in that way and make it very, very clear why we're deviating from those kind of guardrails that have been put up around this. Does that help?
Yes, but to be honest, they only know what you presented to them.
Oh yeah, that's great.
We could come up with something really great that they haven't thought of, theoretically. I hear you.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think that's well within the realm of possibility. I'm not, yeah, absolutely.
Dr. Tomberlin, this is Olivia Oxendine.
Yes.
This is such a good conversation, and I can't think of anything I've ever read about or heard about in my years in public education more visionary than this. And Ms. Covington, or it could be Dr. Covington, is raising a very, very important point. I'm wondering if the process, in designing the process, if there has been any thought given to maybe checkpoints along the way, like every 3 months or so, we come together as a group to do something could be called, for the lack of a better term, like a fidelity check, to make sure that we aren't too far out of the box, the guardrails of the piece the information that has been brought before the state board.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. And I do want to recognize to everybody on the subcommittee, Dr. Oxendine is a member of the State Board of Education. So, and as is Jill Kamnitz, who is on this call. So I don't want you to feel like you would not have feedback I don't think that they feel like they would be speaking for the entire board, but they could give us some perspectives on whether they think that's any proposal might be, a little far out of what the board is pondering. So we do have those resources embedded in these subcommittees, but also to Dr. Oxendine's point, we can certainly work with Chair Miller to talk about how we kind of check in with the board from time to time and get feedback so that we're better able to guide you all in kind of what reasonable changes are and reasonable departures from what's been proposed are. I think that's certainly within the realm of this. Again, In many ways, I'll go back to this, what I said before, in many ways, what we're presenting here to you is a straw man. We fully encourage you to find the holes in this. And what our job is going to be is to continually come back to you and say, that's great. How does that serve students? And how does that serve, and how is that measurable? Those are what we at DPI are going to keep pushing you on. And then those questions about what's, amenable to the board and or possibly the legislature, we'll get you that information as it's, as we move through this process and make sure that we're on track for getting approval.
Hey, Tom, this is Angela. Do we have a white paper or some kind of document that backs up this graph? The one graph?
I think there is,
Or some kind of research, it may not be a white paper, but I imagine that didn't come without some reading of some things, so.
oh yes.
I'm wondering if it might be helpful for this committee, subcommittee, to have, access to that, whether everyone wants to read that or not. They might be like, this looks great, I don't need to know the justification. Other people might be like, it would be nice to know the justification. So if there are articles or models or, whatever brought that forward, that it was pieces of research or, other models, if we can have that thrown into our SharePoint folder, that might be really helpful for different learning styles that are represented by all these wonderful people on the subcommittee.
Yeah, absolutely. So Kim,
I'll look at, the resources that were provided for the state board meeting, because I think there were some other things other than the PowerPoint.
and I know Megan has put together a list of the research that was used by the Human Capital Roundtable.
Yes,
So
we do have that.
we can reach out to SREB for that too. That's a great point, Dr. Bullock. Well, that should be in the resource repository for all the subcommittees.
If there are no other questions, then I would ask our committee co-chairs, subcommittee co-chairs, if they want, they can propose adjournment.
I'll make a motion, we adjourn.
And I second it.
So could we, if you could say your name when you're seconding or.
This is Wesley Wood. I'll make a motion, we adjourn.
This is Ann Bullock, I second that motion.
So could one of you,
All those in,
there you go.
all those in favor? Please,
Aye.
aye. You can unmute yourself.
Aye.
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 Thank you all. Thank you.
Thank you.
So we are adjourned. Thank you all for joining us. Thanks to the DPI team. And Kim, thanks for being our handler. It's gonna be quite helpful for all of us. Please make sure you can get into the SharePoint site when Kim gives us that word, and we'll be in touch about our next meeting when we get to work. So thank you. Have a great day.
Hey, Lawrence.